Hi everyone, you are listening to She Leads with Carly. Our guest today is Desiree Peterkin Bell. Desiree is the president and CEO of DPBell Associates, a public affairs firm. But prior to DPBell, she has served as a trusted advisor to incredible leaders for over 25 years, including Michael Bloomberg, Cory Booker, and President Obama. I absolutely love this chat with Desiree. She talks about a time in her life where she had a quarter-life crisis, something that not many people talk about, but is definitely relevant, where she really didn't know what was her next step. And she also talks about the importance of following your purpose rather than the position. There's so much in this episode. I hope you enjoy it as much as I love talking to Desiree. Enjoy. Hello, Desiree. Thank you so much for coming on to She Leads today. I'm so excited to just talk to you, hear your story, and learn from you. So first, how are you doing today?
I'm doing very well. How are you doing? Thanks for having me.
Of course, I'm doing so well. So, Desiree, you are the president and CEO of DPBell Associates, which is a public affairs firm where you help people by leveraging your expertise in problem solving, crisis communication, strategic counsel, and brand development. And you've been honored as one of the industry's best and brightest in the country by PR Week's 40 Under 40. You've received a Shorty Award, and you're recognized by the Philadelphia Tribune as one of the Philadelphia's most influential African-American women, and recognized by Black Enterprise Magazine as a triple threat. And through all of this, which we'll obviously discuss, you've served as a trusted advisor to a dynamic group of American cities and leaders for over 25 years. So before we get into the detail of all of that, I want to go all the way back to Swarthmore College. You got a degree in political science and education. So take me to this, Desiree. What were you thinking? You know, did you have this whole career trajectory planned out for you? How much did you know at this point, and what were you asking yourself?
No, I did not. So I simply was trying to introduce myself to the world. So I went to Swarthmore College, which is a small liberal arts school. I call it a small Ivy, where I had the opportunity to grow in an amazing way and ask really hard questions of systems and people in an academic setting, which was a safe setting. And then I actually went, I was supposed to go to law school and become this high-powered attorney. I wound up working at Skadden Arps, which is a really big global law firm at 4 Times Square. And it was an amazing opportunity. My experience was supposed to be focused on the antitrust division. So some folks might be too young to remember this, but this is when Christie's and Sotheby's were engaged in an entanglement price fixing case. And also U.S. Tobacco. So those were our clients at the time. But I had a pivotal moment. I really realized that given who I was as a person, my interest and my passion, as a young woman of color, as a Black woman, that I didn't really find a setting in that area. I couldn't really answer the questions about why rich people were stealing from other rich people. I didn't get it.
Right. Yeah.
And so I had what's called a quarter life crisis, which I believe is really real, which is, you know, the reality that you have so many opportunities and so many options before you, and you're just not quite sure which one to pick. And so I actually walked out of the law firm, and I had no path before me. But I knew that that was something I did not necessarily want to engage in. And the highlight for me there was I saw a Black woman sitting across from me, and she had visible effects of smoking. And she looked at me like I was on the wrong side of the table. And it was at that moment that I started to question who was supposed to protect this woman, what systems were supposed to be in place and policies were supposed to be in place to inform and communicate with her. And I realized that I needed to do more. And so I did what most people don't do. I went back to school to get a master's in public policy and began my formal training as a public affairs and political science specialist, I'll say.
Wow. Okay. So before we even, get into that and go further down that path, tell me a bit more about this quarter life crisis, because as you said, it's way more common
Yes,
than people put out. You have your midlife crisis, you have this time in your life where you feel,
right.
you're lost, you don't know where to go. But take me a little into that, the hardest time. What was going through your mind? Were there people, helping you, or on the other hand saying like you're crazy for leaving this law firm? What are you doing with your life?
Yeah.
Or yeah, how did you get through it?
All the above. So, I mean, for me, and I think for many generations, I was a first generation college student. Okay.
Okay.
So I was the first person in my family to go to college, right? And then go to what some would call a prestigious college. And I went on full scholarship. And so, from that standpoint, there was a lot of pressure, familial pressure on me about getting a really, really good job, making a lot of money, right? Because that is how success was defined for me at that time.
Yep.
And so that's where the angst about the quarter life crisis was, because I felt like I was letting my family down by not engaging in this high powered position where I had lots of money and access to stuff, but it wasn't really making me happy.
Mm,
And I tell young people this all the time, which is the money will come, but you have to find happiness and purpose in what you're doing. And that is the challenge that I was trying to find. I was trying desperately to find purpose and happiness and work that I really wanted to do and put my time and energy and heart into. And so my mother understood. I actually came home and cried to her. And I told her, I said, I don't want to disappoint you, but I'm just not happy doing this. And she told me to follow my purpose. And that
wow.
was some of the best advice ever. And that is what has carried me to every other position in my career.
Wow, I love that. And we'll talk about this more because I know you're big on purpose, not position. And this is like a
Yes.
motto of yours. So we'll talk about that. But I want to push more on that aspect of, follow your purpose because the money will come. And, on the other hand, I
Hmm.
know many friends from college who go into finance and, they're making a lot of money, but they absolutely
Yep.
hate their lives, or they're, like just not having a good time because in their mind, there's the idea where now's the time you struggle, you fight, you work hard, and then
Right.
you'll have the freedom to find your purpose. So it's almost the complete
Hmm.
opposite path. So what do you say to that type of mindset where maybe now is the time to work hard, make
Yeah.
money, and then you can find your happiness?
Yeah. I mean, I will say this, times have changed, right? And
Yeah.
so we are in a position right now where, and even, even folks younger than myself, right? There's so many opportunities for folks to actually even create their own paths that don't exist right now. Back in the day, if a title didn't exist, you couldn't do it.
Right.
If you had to, if there was something that you wanted to do and it simply did not exist at that job, at that company, at that brand, you were kind of out of luck. And so I say to those folks, there's a real reality here, though, too, where there is sometimes a lot of family expectation,
Yeah.
right? Especially for those folks who are coming from really strong knit, culturally knit families and communities where people look at you like, oh, you did it, you made it, you're the whatever that big title is, whatever that big check is, right?
Yeah.
And there is something to be said about the pressure the carries, right? The pressure you can carry from that. But at the same time, there's also another reality about finding your own happiness. And so I tell folks, do what makes you happy because it's your life, right? Everyone else is living their life.
Yep.
You have to find and carve out that place and space and passion for you, because at the end of the day, when you're the one trying to get up every single morning, you have
Yep.
to be happy with the work that you're doing. You can call folks on the phone and they can encourage you, maybe if they're available, but it really resides in you. And so it is a task to be able to find your purpose, and to be able to live in that and to be able to feel comfortable in that. It was a journey for me, definitely. Like I said, because of the family expectations I had on me and even my community expectations. But I
Yep.
also knew that if I wanted to get back to my community, if I wanted to make my family proud, then what better way to do that than to be smiling every single day and making as much impact as I can that actually results back into the community, which is why I focus on a lot of my social justice issues right now.
Oh, you're so right. I love that. And also, like when you're making an impact, you have to, it has to come from a place of, you're fulfilling, you're happy inside, you're fulfilling your purpose. And at the end of the day, that'll translate more. So I love that so much. So now tell me, you got your master's in public policy. Take me through the next few years, becoming a trusted advisor, what that
Yes.
entails, and onwards. Yeah.
Yeah, so I got my master's in public policy, and I had already dibbled and dabbled in Washington, D.C. Because my mother was a community advocate. She had me interning early on when I was younger, which is how I think I got the bug, to be honest. Because I was like, oh, I like this. This is like direct impact stuff. Love it.
Wow.
And so I decided to do something completely different. So a program that I got my master's in was called the National Urban Fellows Program. And it was a program that literally paid for my master's program completely, with the idea that I would give of my talent and my time and myself to a project in government. And so my project at the time that I was chosen to give of was with Mayor Bart Peterson in Indianapolis. He became the first mayor in the country to have the authority to charter schools.
Wow.
And so I worked with his office to lobby the Indiana General Assembly, but also create this program for what the charter school process would be for Indianapolis. And so for me, it was about creating innovation in government, right? Outside of the regular confines that existed. And so it really challenged me to think about how government can be creative and it can be innovative when and if you have the right people at the table and you also have community input. And so that really like fed my spirit and my soul. And then I went to, while I was in Indianapolis, I wanted to come back home to New York City. I'm from Brooklyn, New York. And I had been talking to this guy who wanted to run for mayor, and he was a billionaire. Nobody could quite understand why. And and so I would come home and interview with him and his team, and then 9/11 happened. And it literally shook New York City and me to my core. It shook the world, right? This entire country to its core. And I decided on that day, after losing some friends, unfortunately, that I wanted to come home to New York City and help rebuild my city.
Wow.
And so I took a job with Bloomberg, who was elected mayor, to both help to rebuild New York City, and then also help to create and communicate what was happening in New York City around city services, around expectations from city government, and then also having to literally redefine and innovate this new way of how this government, having been shook to its core, was going to, adhere to new rules about how to communicate with its constituents, how to provide for its constituents in the midst of tragedy. So that was probably the hardest job of my life.
Oh my goodness. And I can imagine there's so many factors that come into it. And so during this time when you were, becoming trusted advisor of these big political figures that have a big impact, did you ever have an experience, not only as a woman, but a woman of color going through this? Did you feel like you had to find that inner confidence from yourself even more than most people? Or did you ever have that experience?
Yes, 100%. I was very young when I worked for Mayor Bloomberg. And I remember him telling me that, New York City is the largest New York City government budget, like in the country. It actually rivals that the New York City budget can rival the budget of many countries.
Right. Yeah.
And so, this is after 9/11. I'm in charge of a lot of different strategy. working very closely with police commissioner, fire commissioners, Office of Emergency Management, education, and a whole host of other commissioners and deputy mayors. And so as a young woman, I wasn't always confident. I looked around the table and I would see I was often the youngest, only, female, brownest person at a decision making table. And so for the longest time, at the beginning of my experience, Mayor Bloomberg said, "Don't tell anyone your age," because the fear was folks wouldn't listen to me if they knew I was 22 years old.
Wow.
So, and I think that was, both a indication that people have perceptions, right? There's significant ageism that always goes on both sides. That you haven't lived yet, you haven't experienced, you don't have 25 years of experience
Right.
at this moment. So how can you be the one in charge of all of this? And so, I remember being like 30 for 10 years. It was hilarious. Every year they were like, "Happy birthday." I was like, "Thanks. I'm 30."
Oh my goodness. That is so crazy. So, okay, I must say, like, in a way, there is some truth to, experience does matter and it is important and you learn on the job and all of that. So, was
Yes.
it scary being 22 and having all this, like, so much responsibility, talking to the fire department, all these different things, and you're
Yes.
22? It's not easy. So, how was that transition to kind of, you know, how was that transition going from this leadership role from, the educational being learning student learning mindset to now doing? How was that?
I mean, so the thing for me is I am very confident. I know what I know and I know what I don't know. Right. And so
Okay.
I think that every person has to be in this framework. Pretending to know something you don't know anything about is only going to get you in hot water, and it's only
Yeah.
going to unveil that you really don't know what you're talking about. So I really built my decisions and my meetings and my conversations with the highest levels of government, trying to find collective and consensus, right? Which is
Mm,
what is the best decision to make when I have four departments at the table, right? And they all have their own ideas about how it should be done. What is the compromise that we can make? And
right.
so really, my form of leadership and or not even coalition building, but consensus building was making sure that everyone felt like they had a place and a voice at the table, right? And I
Yeah.
wasn't the one telling them what to do, but that the decisions coming out of that meeting just made the most sense, right? Given
Wow.
everything
Okay.
else that was on the table. That's how I built and I was known as that person, right? So when people would come and sit down with me, we had hard conversations to have. We had some hard ones. Um, we fought for the smoking ban in New York City, so that was under my watch. That was under
Wow.
my leadership. The smoking ban, tort reform, the film tax credit. The smoking ban was probably the hardest, I think, because of where New York City was after 9/11 and the idea that it was an economic argument from the restaurant owners that they would completely lose money and that the restaurants would shut down if patrons could not smoke in their
Wow.
establishments. And so, we, again, with everyone at the table, realized that the most powerful narrative here was it was a public health conversation, right? And
Mm,
public health can trump economics. And I think we're seeing that sometimes, with some other stuff that's happening, specifically with
right.
this pandemic. But that
Yeah.
was a conversation that we were having. And that is how we were able to get the legislation passed in New York City with the smoking ban.
Wow. Okay. So take me now through what went through your mind to say, okay, it's time for me to move on, or, become another trusted advisor in another city, or whatnot. How was that career trajectory
Yeah,
thought out?
definitely. So New York City we were coming back. We were, we did some amazing things. There were two pivotal moments in there that I don't want to leave out for me specifically. One was, and this is a story just of resilience, right? So I talked about having a quarter life crisis and then coming to government. In 2003, I walked into City Hall in New York City in July, and a friend of mine, I walked in with a friend of mine, Councilman James Davis, And as we walked in, an hour later, he was shot dead in front of me in New York
Oh
City
my
Hall.
God.
And I had walked in, which unbeknownst to me, I walked in with the shooter. And so, that moment for me crystallized that um, politics can be a dirty sport. When I say a dirty sport, I mean there are some people in this industry who are solely committed to position and not
Yeah.
purpose.
Mm.
And But that the people and the good voices and the good stewardship uh, 100% outweighs and can outweigh those small group of folk who are solely committed to leveraging their own positions in politics. And so that for me gave me even more resolve that I needed to do something around communities, around gun violence, and really understand how to connect with people on the ground level even more, even though I was in city government, I came from Brooklyn. So I realized at that time in New York City, as we were coming back, and even after that traumatic event, a friend of mine was running for mayor in Newark, New Jersey, and it was a city that was struggling with some of these things: gang violence, shootings.
Yeah.
But it was really a resilient city, a really resilient city made up of amazing people. But the bad stories just kept coming out instead of the good ones. And so I decided that I would work with my friend, Cory Booker, and I would be his communications director and really create a whole brand in the city, a brand in the man, and really highlight some of the greatness that was coming out of the city from the community and from its own people. And so, partnering with Cory, we highlighted everything from a fatherhood center. We got him on Twitter for the first time, which is how he got on Twitter. And we
Wow.
really wanted to elevate stories of people in a urban community of color who were trying to do the best in their communities. And so
Yeah.
that was a really, really powerful experience for me.
Wow. Wow, what's so beautiful, first of all, it's clear that you strive at, being able to take these positions of, people, whether it's communities, organizations, people, whatever it may be, when they're at like their lowest and they need to kind of get up and, thrive in some way, even though they don't see it at all. You kind of see that and are able to lift them up, which is it's amazing. So I want to know, at that early stage, like day 0, day 10, those early moments,
Yes.
what goes through your mind? Like what is happening? How do you kind of lift them up, and go forward? Because I see it also relating to anything in life, whether it's personal issue you're going through, whether it's, you're the founder of your own company and the company culture is at an all-time low, or whatever it may
Mhm.
be. So
Right.
how do you take that initial step and like get just a little bit, get over the hump?
I mean, a lot of that is understanding what the intent is, right? And so I think it was very clear in New York City. The intent was to bring what I believe is the most resilient city back in the world, right? And have it be at the forefront of where it was before. But it's also in entrusting, the government with the system and the ability to be able to do that for its people. And also requiring different things from your government as well. And so, but it's also about the leader. I do think for that moment in time, Michael Bloomberg was the right leader for the city at that moment, and I think it was evidenced by how quickly New York City came back during that process and how innovative we were able to do things. Right, so
Right.
I always think about the flexibility of innovation. So at that time, Mayor Bloomberg allowed me and a number of other folks to figure out how we can bring and increase revenue in New York City. Wall Street was down, right? Like nothing was, things were literally halted. So
Yeah.
how do we figure out how to be really creative in New York City? And so it's about having a leader who understands that something different needs to be done. Number one. Number two, having a leader who entrusts in the people around them, because that's also part of it. I would have never been able to do these things if those leaders didn't entrust me with the responsibility, with the expectation, despite my age, despite, a whole bunch of other things, but they
Yeah.
entrusted in me to be able to deliver on these things. And so I think part of it is knowing who you want to work for and what their focus is, and then
Mm.
aligning with them to be able to make as much impact as possible.
Wow. I think also it reminded me when you mentioned the trust, I think it also for like the employee standpoint or for those people, knowing that your leader trusts you, believes in you, that the importance of confidence, I think that also comes to it because that in the end will make a better
Yeah,
result for everyone. So I think that's great. So
a hundred
tell me,
percent. Yes.
how did you come to, DP Bell and Associates? You're the president and CEO of a public affairs firm. So tell me about what you do now for the public affairs firm, and then I want to also talk
Yes.
about some reflections in the quarter life crisis and where you are today.
Yes. Definitely. So after working in government and working with some trusted advisors, including President Barack Obama, helped to lead Pennsylvania for him in 2012.
Wow.
I had known him and, was part of the original Obama team when he first ran for president. And so, after years of working with amazing leaders like President Obama, like Cory Booker, like Michael Bloomberg, I decided to use those skills and really focus on how do I create movements, not moments? How do I
Mm.
align with people who want to make a difference? And how do I work with brands that matter? And so that's what we do at DP Bell and Associates. So while I am driven by purpose, not position, which allows me to not necessarily focus on whatever the title is, right? And I'm not driven by the money. We're not driven by the glitz, the glamour, the clout. We're driven by the impact and the purpose of the work. And so a lot of that work includes things like passing Breonna's Law in Virginia, which is which is the first law of its kind to ban no-knock warrants. Breonna Taylor was a young Black woman who was killed in her home
Yep.
because of a no-knock warrant. And so, focusing on criminal justice and police reforming initiatives and activities. Also focusing on civil rights cases and civil rights issues that impact people of color, whether they are immigrants, whether they are immigrants and people of color, Black folks, Hispanic folks, Asian folks, Native American, Indigenous folks. That is our goal, is to allow place and space for these voices to be heard and their experiences and their stories to be told. The other sample is, having worked with a lot of the criminal justice organizations and civil rights organizations around the Derek Chauvin trial, which is happening, and making sure that the national media here in the US was very clear about how they presented the trial. It wasn't the George Floyd trial. It's not the George Floyd
Mm.
trial. George Floyd is dead. It was the Derek
Yeah.
Chauvin trial. He was a police officer who's on trial. It's little
Yeah.
things like that that can get into the psyche of people in terms of how they think about justice, how they think about reform. And so
Wow.
making sure
Yeah.
that that narrative is very clear. It's also doing some other fun things. Like we were in Orlando and we did a high level impact event for a client who brought folks together. Everyone was vaccinated. Woo!
Amazing.
And just really wanted to, have an event around thought leadership in terms of how innovations can be shaped around sustainability, environment, and economic development, right? So we really cover the gamut in the work that we do. I'm grateful for it. I'm also a mom, I'm a wife. So,
Amazing.
those are the things that take my time and my energy. But my focus really at DP Bell and Associates is to try to make as much impact as possible. We also work with AMP Global, which is a global telecom and media company that produced the first docuseries in TV format born on the continent of Africa,
Wow.
really highlighting the voices of the youth along, the entire continent. So our focus is making, like I said, as much impact as possible. I don't see myself slowing down anytime soon. There's obviously more work and innovation, than we have the bandwidth for. But I try to align myself with things that will help me wake up the next morning and say, how do I make my daughter's world a little brighter today? Those are
Wow.
usually the lens by which I think the work that I do.
Amazing. Okay, so usually I want to get to the fun questions, but I do want to ask you, what does goal setting look like to you? Because I know it's impact and you want to make that impact, but as you
Mhm.
said, you're not stopping, and I hope that you're not stopping because
Right.
you're incredible. So tell me, what does that look to you? How do you imagine the next year, 5 years, 10 years? How are you planning that, and also how are you actually making it happen tangibly?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, and I'd say this to anyone who's listening, goal
Yeah.
setting has changed for me over time. Okay. And to be frank, I think that comes with age, wisdom, and experience. What do I mean by that? um, what is more important to me today, like I said, I think of, my work through the lens of making my daughter's world better each and every day. That is how I choose to do the work that I do. Is this going to help my daughter? Is this going to help someone who looks like her, someone in her community?
Right.
And so for me, a lot of the work today deals with impact, but impact that always goes back to my daughter's world. And I think the other important thing is integration, right? So goal setting for me, when I was in my 20s, right? So if I was when I was sitting at the table with a bunch of commissioners in New York City, my goal was making sure that everything that happened in that meeting made sense and that we came up with a very conscious consensus like solution,
Yeah.
which is great. Um, it's changed a little bit for me now because I'm not in that same position, right? My purpose is still the same in terms of consensus building and coalition building, but I'm now trying to say, how do I also figure out how to enjoy my work?
Mm.
How do I enjoy my life? How am I creating a place and space where I'm actually more present?
Wow. Yeah.
And so still doing the work and still being driven by purpose. Because I'm a mom to a teenager, because I'm married, I want to be present. I want to be impactful in the world still, but I also want to be present. And I think that's extremely important in terms of how I think about my work, which is why my daughter travels with me a lot of times,
Mm.
which is why if my husband can, you know, do work remotely, but I have to be at a certain place and hop on a plane. Can we make it a family event as well? I'm very, very intentional about who I give my energy to, how I spend my time, but also being very present, even in the midst of making impact in the middle of purpose.
Wow, I love that. I really love that. And I think being present is so important, especially nowadays. There's so many things to be distracted by, and it's easy to just get lost in it. So it's like realizing, being present, focusing on that is so important. So I really love that. So, okay, Desiree, what I love to do and finish off, I could honestly talk to you for hours more, but for the sake of time, what's a passion or hobby that you have that's just completely unrelated to any of your work?
Eating.
Oh, me
Eating is a
too.
passion.
That's a great answer, and I
I
very
know
much
it,
align with that.
yes, I and I there's and I love it. I think no, seriously, and I have made food a central portion of a passion project that I've been doing for years. So after the US elections in 2016, I decided to bring women together around food, right? To have some really interesting, robust conversations about not what divides us, but what aligns us. And so food for me, because I love it so much, has often been a central focus of my convenings, right? Because the
Love it.
expectation is, I assume most people have to eat. So
Exactly.
why don't we eat
Yeah.
together?
Amazing. And if I'm not mistaken, they're called chat and choose, right? That's what you've created?
Yes, they are chat and choose.
Uh, I
Yes,
love
that's
it. It's
100%. They're called
amazing.
chat and
Yes, I encourage everyone listening to go check out Chat and Choose because even like you said, the purpose, the mission is amazing. And then you bring in
yeah,
this idea where you got to eat, so may as well. May as well do it over food.
Yes.
It's amazing. And my last question, so I will show you mine first, but what I love to do is, what is
Okay.
a weird or fun talent you have that no one really knows about? So almost a hidden talent. So I'm going to show you mine first. And what I like to do is
Okay.
I throw blueberries into my mouth. I throw them up and catch them in my mouth. All right, so we'll see how this goes. All right, there we go.
Nice. That's talent.
Thank you.
That's
I
very
practice a lot.
I like that. Okay. All right. I don't know if I can do blueberries, but
It's all right. It takes years of practice.
Ooh, yeah, I don't know. I'd be eating, there'd be a lot of blueberries on the floor.
Exactly. So Desiree, what would you
So
say
I
if
think
you
for
had to
me,
choose? Yes.
So my talent would be, and it's a joke in my family, but because I always joke and I'm like, oh, I'm an opera singer today. I'm an opera singer. I do not know opera. I just want to be really clear. So I joke around and I just say things like, that's it.
Wow, I love it. Oh my God, the fact that you gave us a preview, amazing. That's all I could ask for. Thank you so much. Well, Desiree, this has been so fun. It's been so fun, and I've learned so much from you. You're incredible, the impact you're making. So really, like, on behalf of me, everyone, thank you. And thank you for coming onto the show. I've loved it.